German pilots laughed at the P-47 Thunderbolt until its 8.50s rained lead on them. The real story. In the early years of World War II, the Luftwaffe ruled the skies over Europe. Their sleek Messerschmitt Bf 109s and Focke-Wulf 190s were fast, agile, and battle-tested. By contrast, when the Americans entered the war and introduced their new Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, German pilots reportedly laughed at it. To them, it looked like a flying barrel, huge, heavy, and clumsy compared to their streamlined fighters. The Germans called it names like the Jug, short for Juggernaut. But that nickname would soon prove prophetic, because the P-47 wasn't built to dance, it was built to destroy. A beast born from engineering muscle. The P-47 was the brainchild of aircraft designers Alexander Kartveli and Alexander Seversky, two immigrants from Eastern Europe who believed in one thing: power. Instead of chasing lightweight design trends, they created a fighter around one of the largest piston engines ever built, the Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp, an 18-cylinder, 2,000-horsepower monster. That engine gave the P-47 immense speed at high altitudes, over 430 miles per hour, but also made it massive, weighing nearly 8 tons fully loaded. It was the largest single-engine fighter of the war. To many pilots seeing it for the first time, it looked more like a bomber than a fighter. Early skeptics within the U.S. Army Air Forces worried it would never compete with the nimble German planes. Even American pilots joked that if you wanted to turn, you had to send the Thunderbolt a written request in advance. But what the P-47 lacked in grace, it more than made up for in brute strength and firepower. 850s, a wall of lead. The Thunderbolt was armed with 8.5 caliber Browning M2 machine guns, 4 in each wing. Together, they could fire nearly 7,000 rounds per minute, throwing a curtain of bullets so dense that a single pass could shred anything in its path. Each gun carried up to 425 rounds, giving the pilots several long bursts in combat. The .5 caliber rounds could tear through the armor of German fighters, slice apart engines, and even penetrate the hardened skin of bombers or locomotives. Veteran pilots said when all 8 guns opened up, the Thunderbolt seemed to stop in the air from the recoil. The sound was unforgettable, a deep, hammering roar that echoed through the sky. Early encounters, underestimated but deadly. The P-47 entered combat with the U.S. 8th Air Force in April 1943, escorting heavy bombers over occupied Europe. At first, the Germans dismissed it. To them, the P-47 looked too big to be a serious threat. The Luftwaffe aces believed their lighter Bf 109s and FW-190s could easily out-target and out-climb the Thunderbolt. And in tight-turning dogfights, they were often right. The Thunderbolt wasn't built for elegant maneuvers, but air combat wasn't about elegance anymore. The American pilots quickly learned that the P-47's strengths were speed, altitude, and toughness. Instead of turning fights, they used boom and zoom tactics, diving from high altitude, unleashing their 8 guns in devastating bursts, and climbing away before the Germans could react. At 30,000 feet, powered by its turbo-supercharged engine, the Thunderbolt could outrun almost anything. And even if a German did get on its tail, shooting it down was another story entirely. Built like a flying tank, the P-47's rugged design made it almost indestructible. Its air-cooled radial engine could take hits that would cripple a liquid-cooled German engine. The cockpit was heavily armored, and self-sealing fuel tanks reduced the risk of explosions. Stories soon spread of Thunderbolts returning to base with massive holes in their wings, missing cylinders, or oil pouring from the cowling, yet still flying. One famous pilot recalled, "If you were in a Thunderbolt, you could take a hit, light a cigarette, and still make it home." This toughness gave American pilots immense confidence. They could dive through enemy fire, attack ground targets, or slug it out with German fighters and still survive. The Germans' laughter faded fast. The turning point, escort to Berlin. By late 1943, the U.S. Army Air Forces were launching daylight bombing raids deep into Germany. The B-17 and B-24 bombers needed long-range escort fighters to protect them from German interceptors. At first, the P-47's limited range meant it could only accompany bombers part way. But as drop tanks were added, its reach extended deep into enemy territory. In the skies over Schweinfurt, Regensburg, and Berlin, the P-47 began carving its legend. Thunderbolt squadrons learned to dive from above the bombers, blasting German fighters with their .50s in explosive passes. The Luftwaffe aces, who once mocked the P-47, found themselves being torn apart by a wall of lead. German pilots who underestimated it soon learned a grim lesson. If a Thunderbolt got on your tail, your chances of survival were almost zero.
From fighter to ground attack king. By 1944, the faster, longer-ranged P-47 Mustang began taking over bomber escort duties. Many assumed the P-47's time was over. Instead, the Thunderbolt found a new calling as one of the deadliest ground attack aircraft of the war. Its heavy armor and massive payload capacity made it perfect for low-level missions. The P-47 could carry bombs, rockets, and napalm tanks, turning it into a flying arsenal. From Normandy to the Rhine, Thunderbolts hammered German convoys, tanks, and railroads. They flew so low that pilots could see the fear on the faces of German soldiers below. The Luftwaffe called them Jabos, short for Jagdbomber, and came to dread their arrival. As the Allies advanced through France and into Germany, Thunderbolts swept the roads, destroying anything that moved. German ground troops nicknamed them the Butcherbird's Big Brother, a grudging nod to the feared FW-190. By the war's end, P-47s had destroyed over 86,000 ground targets and shot down over 3,700 enemy aircraft in air combat, an astonishing record. The Germans stopped laughing. By 1944, the Luftwaffe was a shadow of its former self. Fuel shortages, pilot losses, and relentless Allied attacks had gutted its power. The same German pilots who once laughed at the Thunderbolt were now terrified of its presence. Veterans described P-47s diving through flak, firing rockets and guns with devastating precision. The sound of 8.50s rattling across the sky became synonymous with death for Axis troops and pilots alike. The Thunderbolt had gone from a clumsy brute to the workhorse of Allied air power.
Pilot's perspective, power, and protection. Many American pilots who flew both the P-47 and the P-51 Mustang loved the Mustang's range and elegance, but they never forgot the sense of invincibility the P-47 gave them. Major Robert S. Johnson of the 56th Fighter Group, one of the top American aces in Europe, once took over 200 hits from German guns and still brought his P-47 home. His plane was so damaged it was nearly scrapped afterward. He later said, "If I'd been flying anything else, I'd be dead. The Thunderbolt saved my life." The end of the war and lasting legacy. By the end of World War II, more than 15,000 P-47 Thunderbolts had been built, more than any other U.S. fighter of the war. It served in every major theater, Europe, the Pacific, and even post-war air forces around the world. Its combination of power, protection, and firepower set the standard for future fighter bombers. The jet age would soon arrive, but the legend of the Jug endured. In the end, the P-47 Thunderbolt didn't win its reputation through elegance, it earned it through brute force, survivability, and relentless firepower. The very traits the Germans mocked became the reasons they feared it most. From laughter to fear. When the P-47 first appeared, German pilots laughed at the hulking American fighter. When it left, they weren't laughing anymore. Its 850 caliber guns had rained steel and fury across Europe, proving that what looked like a lumbering brute was in truth one of the most effective fighters of the war. The Thunderbolt was a reminder that in combat, power, toughness, and will often triumph over elegance. And for the Luftwaffe, it was a painful lesson, written in fire and lead across the skies of Europe.
Laughed at the hulking American fighter. When it left, they weren't laughing anymore.